Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. With Los Angeles Guerrillas confirming their roster for the Major 4 qualifiers, many are not convinced, Narcisse especially, that it is actually a good idea. Asim has been dropped, Florida might be his likely destination. Definitely very much intrigued to your thoughts though on this roster and its potential in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Really up to the channel, thank you very much indeed for doing that one. We're going to talk about Doug as well, and his, serious complaints actually to the CDL about the Challengers format and his frustrations with actually not being able to relocate to Latin America as he was initially planning. First of all though, we've got to mention this, because unbelievable scenes. USS Texas, after being rumored for quite some time, is actually going to come to this game. I really can't believe the fact that all those good maps they could have remastered from World War II, the London Docks, the Saint-Marie de Mont, like even an Ardennes Forest, right? It wasn't maybe the most enjoyable map to watch, but for competitive play and Harpoon and stuff, it was a pretty damn good map to be honest, looking back at that title. And now we have USS Texas, one of like the worst search and destroy maps ever in my opinion, is now coming to the game. In fairness though, in Vanguard, it actually might be one of the better ones, right? We could see. Now, the issue is here that it comes out on, I believe, the 22nd of June in a couple of days' time. The season starts, or Major 4 qualifiers start on June the 24th. Therefore, realistically, there isn't that much time to test it. And yeah, the fact of the matter is, they're not going to be adding it in between Stage 4 and the World Championship in that kind of couple of weeks period they have after the qualifiers, or after Major 4 concludes, before Champs. So yeah, more than likely, it's not going to be in the game. Kind of unfortunate. It might have actually been all right in this title, right? Who knows how it would have played out. But it would have been interesting to see, because I feel like this map actually, like in this game compared to some of the search and destroy maps we have in this title, would have been maybe even a breath of fresh air, right? But yeah, probably we're not going to see it in play, but it has arrived. But I feel like really it's a what could have been moment where you look at the fact that, okay, Texas, USS Texas is here now, but we could have had a London Docks for some of these other maps earlier in the title, so we actually had a good map set this year, because effectively last year's Cold War was, it was a good game, I think, fundamentally, but it was also safe to some degree from some of the poor maps it had by the raids, the standoffs, like some of the other DLC maps we had. And of course, this game has definitely not had that. It's been a key frustration. Let's talk then, of course, about the Challenger side, the path to pro, as the CDL initially decided to call it. Now, as Doug Martin firstly says, nowadays the Challenger scene is absolutely stacked down there, right? He used to be playing burgers first round of these tournaments. Now he's playing Clayster in the first round for like top 48 in these Challenger tourneys, and only 2 NA teams get to compete at Champs. The reason for this being that effectively the Challengers Champs, if you guys missed it a few days ago, there's 8 teams that get to attend, but the top 4 teams are selected from the global leaderboards, and the global leaderboards are heavily biased towards how people place in these kind of online elites around the world. So European teams that are generally a bit more top heavy, the teams at the top tend to stay together a bit longer, and generally like the talent is more concentrated over in that regions. Those teams, even though they haven't really done quite as much on LAN as the NA teams have done, let's say the Toronto Major for example, they've actually got more points through the entirety of the season than a lot of the NA teams have. So only Toronto Ultra Academy North America has enough points to qualify for the World Championship on, what would effectively be merit in this instance, and 3 of them are European teams. So then the other North American team that can qualify is through a last chance qualifier that's going down over the next month or so, I imagine. So effectively Doug, because he doesn't have enough points to be in the top, has to win this LCQ. I'm not even sure like he has enough points to qualify for it. It's a bit of a mess of a situation. But as he says, I think I'm going to make lemonade. His plan here being, it seems, to actually move to another region. As he said here, the Challenger Champs format apparently will not change. Maybe he talked to people, tried to get it to change. Like he's certainly been campaigning pretty heavily for changes to be made. I think understandably so. Top 4 international seeds auto qualify. Then each region has a qualifier in which the top 8 seeds are invited. Only 1 team qualifies. The issue is, of course, that if he's not in the top 8 seeds from the region with his team changing around all this type of stuff, then he actually doesn't even make the LCQ to qualify for Champs anyway. So therefore he thought, okay, let me just relocate to Latin America and play in their last chance qualifier. And as he says, I feel so terrible for the competitors outside the league. It's directly hurting the future of the league, and I wish all the best to those in the next 2 months, right? Because, I mean, look, we talked about it yesterday. We were certainly hoping that there'd be a 32-team amateur world championship, right? I have no idea really why there's only 8 teams kind of allowed in this tournament. It'd be so much better if there were more, but yeah, the CDL doing CDL things once again. The thing is though, Doug, I feel like this is a sensible decision though from the league to deny the relocation. He's like, okay, make this make sense. Now look, realistically, Doug and co shouldn't really just be able to relocate to Latin America and just compete in kind of their side and qualify through their last chance qualifier despite not being from that region. So like, I think it makes sense that they're not allowed to do that. If that was in the rules, then you couldn't really blame them for kind of taking advantage of that opportunity. But the CDL has said no. The downside of this being though that Doug effectively is now chalked, but it also means that a team like we talked very recently about the South American, Latin American team that qualified for the North American Elite. They moved to North America to qualify for the Elite because there isn't one, I'm pretty sure, the same kind of tournament format in Latin America. So they moved to NA briefly to qualify, and they did that. They were really happy about themselves, understandably so, right? Like to try and get their names out there. But all of a sudden, because they competed competed there, they now have to play in North America, right? They can't play because of these same rules that are affecting Doug's team back in the Latin American last chance qualifier, and therefore because they don't have enough points because they've only just moved to the region, they now can't qualify for champs at all. So despite being the best team from that region, they now can't even qualify for the World Championship on the current ruling because of this relocation situation, right? So you could argue, okay, they should look to the rule book, right, to make sure it was all going to be okay, but still, it just doesn't seem like, for many different sides of the argument here, particularly many intelligent decisions have been made. So yeah, lots of frustrations, understandably so, I think. Speaking of challenges, we've got John apparently joining a challenges team with Yeez, Hamza, and Rex, so kind of confirms that Hamza not going to be joining Paris, it seems, as we kind of looked at yesterday. There was a rumor that Hamza was going to Paris, which didn't really make that much sense. But yeah, Johnny instead of John is happening. He's teaming with down there in challenges now with Yeez as well, so probably Yeez not joining the Florida starting team, and Asim might be that man instead, as we looked at yesterday, and we'll see kind of further indications of that here in just a couple of minutes time. But yeah, John for Johnny is seemingly what Paris are going to try and do, and kind of confirming what we looked at yesterday with them, with Hamza joining the team in place of Jimbo is probably not going to happen either. Let's talk then about the Los Angeles Guerrillas. They confirmed yesterday Neptune is officially joining their roster. They confirmed this rather quickly actually after all the leaks have come through, so they got the deal signed relatively effectively, and I feel like their idea behind these changes makes sense. Like, I feel like the logic behind their decision actually is sensible, but whether it'll actually work out for them, that's another question entirely. They currently sit at 125 CDL points, 120 is the 8th place team, Minnesota at 110 in 9th, so they're very much in the drop zone, and if they lose a few more series, if they pretty much stayed as they were, they probably weren't making champs despite winning Major 2, because they've picked up barely any points all season. They picked up 60 points all season and 65 points at Major 2, so like, it's been pretty shocking as of that one miracle run, you could argue. As Clay says, let's get it, Trav, you got to be the one to make it to champs right out of that kind of initial roster that the subliners had. Clayster, Crimsix, Neptune was on the team as well, Hydra being there of course as well. Like, Neptune might be the only guy to make it to champs out of that quartet, right, which would be kind of incredible if that comes to fruition. Now this is the full roster they confirm. Slasher, Spart, so Spart is back in place of Gunless, Neptune and Huke as the SMG duo. It's an interesting team because on paper you hear the names, you think, okay, wow, this could be pretty good, but when you really think about it, it does just seem that this team is pretty middle of the pack, to be honest. I'm not particularly impressed. This doesn't really jump off the paper to me as, okay, wow, this team's going to be an absolute force, because especially comparing them to the previous iteration, I'm not really sure it improves much at all, if anything, to be honest. We'll see that in a second here, but I think the Gunless for Spart thing makes sense, right? It's kind of tough to see, but Gunless, he didn't really perform too well since he was kind of back from his illness, and I feel like Spart obviously did win the major with them, and Slasher probably thinks, okay, in terms of an AR partner, Spart's got more out of the team, got more out of me, and we were playing with him than we did with Gunless, so let's bring Spart back. But bringing Spart just back for Gunless, don't think that would have worked either, right? Because the team chemistry would have been exactly how it was kind of after Major 2 when they did the same thing, and it really didn't work out for them well at all. So they thought, okay, we've got to make another change. Neptune's there as a free agent. He's been killing it in challenges. He wants to prove himself, like he wants to get his second chance. Crim was all this talk earlier this season that no one wanted him. Everyone knew that this guy just didn't play the game the right way, but now he does get his second chance, and then, well, here he goes joining the Los Angeles Guerrillas alongside Huke, right? It's kind of two former Halo guys, maybe have wanted to play with each other for a little bit of time, but that's the SMG duo, and I'm not really sure how well this is going to work, because Huke and Slasher both have not, despite their name value, have not been particularly good this season, right? Huke especially, I think, has been pretty underwhelming in that SMG role. Can Neptune get the best out of him? But then again, like with Asim on the team as he was, like Asim was probably the best SMG they had, at least on average performance so far this season. Huke was slightly more consistent though as time progressed. But Neptune earlier on this year was a pretty slow SMG, right? Obviously you could argue he was getting forced into playing those roles, but yeah, I'm far from convinced this SMG duo is going to do all that much. The way that Huke's been playing and Neptune as well didn't really impress me at the start of the season, right? So I'm not convinced this team is actually a massive upgrade at all, and as Asim says, I'm sure he's pretty frustrated. Team unfortunately decided to go into stage 4 without me. Fully respect the team for their decision, got nothing but the utmost respect for this team and organisation, but well, as Arcitys goes on to say in reply, and pretty common feeling I think in the community, respectable, but nah, this is a bad move, right? So basically Asim saying he respects the team for this, but Arcitys like, okay, what are they actually playing at? Doesn't make much sense. So dropping Asim after the start of the season he had, that's it's pretty tough scenes for him, but who knows if he can join an actual better team, because I wouldn't be surprised if the Florida roster is better than this one, right? So I'm not really sure what you guys think, because it seems kind of like a lateral move in a way. I'm not really sure the team gets massively better. I do think with Spart there though, and Neptune, the fact that like Neptune's search and destroy stats the last couple of months in challenges have been ridiculous, and Spart is a great S&D player, so I think their search and destroy can improve with this lineup change, which I think is maybe what they're thinking. Okay, if we win a few more game 5s against some teams, that might be the factor here, but in terms of consistently competing in Respawn with this SMG line against some of the other ones, like it just doesn't seem like, on paper, like the names are good, the name value is good. Whether it actually works out right and whether Neptune can get along with Slasher the way he necessarily didn't get along with Crimsix, let's just say earlier on in the season, that's another question entirely. essentially. And even if it works in the short term, I kind of doubt that those two will be teaming together going into the next season, for example. Now, even the subletters say this, right? Because, of course, Los Angeles Guerrillas, when I guess they signed Asim last year, said, okay, you drop something, and well, so of course, Los Angeles Guerrillas have done exactly the same thing right here. And as Gunless says, just to talk about his perspective real quick, man, this is by far the worst year of my life, only keeps getting worse. So, tough scenes for Gunless, man. Such a good player on his day, but he just hasn't been at that level, unfortunately, since maybe it's a team dynamic related thing, but also like it's individually since his illness, right? He come back from the surgery. He hasn't quite been the same player yet. I'm sure he can get back to that point. He was a great player for them and really consistent player at the start of the season. I think certainly Gunless has a lot of name value as well. Another team next year will certainly pick him up if he doesn't get back into one of these squads, but unlikely. But you do have to wonder, right? Gunless has been dropped just so many times in his career now, like his stats in stage 2 or stage 3, sorry, obviously were pretty bad. But you look at a guy like Gunless, you look at a guy like Parasite, these guys have been benched and traded so many times in their career. I mean, Parasite definitely takes the cake. He's been on 50 teams in his career. It's outrageous. But Gunless has been on so many as well. It seems every year he gets benched or traded or something happens to him. And even though I feel like his attitude has changed around, this actually was performance related, which is kind of rare to be honest, because usually Gunless is okay, the performance is good, but the friction in the team between Slasher and Gunless, we've seen it before. Rise Nation towards the end of that tenure back in World War II, it happened. They decided to team up again this year. It seemed to kind of work out briefly. They had a brief period before Gunless had to step out and Spart came in. They looked quite good online. They won a few games. Then they obviously did a good job at the major, winning the entire thing with Spart. But I'm sure in a way Gunless feels kind of harshly done by with this situation as well. So hopefully everything works out for him. But I do think the way things were trending with this team, that actually this is probably a sensible move. But bringing Spart back in on his own probably wasn't going to work without another change. And this is the thing, as Ake says though, this is why this roster to me is kind of underwhelming. That the star players, theoretically the star players, aren't actually playing like star players. And as Ake said, he basically suggested this, right? Get rid of Gunners, get rid of Asim, keep Slasher and Huke, and bring in Hydra and Scrappy. That was his suggestion. Get Hydra off New York, get Scrappy off the Toronto Ultras bench, and that could actually be a contending team, right? I think certainly Hydra and Scrappy in place of Spart and Neptune is a much stronger pairing than what they actually have here, right? And this might not have been a realistic option, but it just goes to show that the team they potentially could have had, which could have maybe pushed for something, I just don't think that team is it. Maybe I'll get proven wrong. We shall see. The spiciest thing about this being that the very first week of the qualifiers, we've got Los Angeles Guerrillas versus the Subliners, right? This is fantastic because, of course, Neptune on the LAG guys now, he will certainly have a very massive point to prove up against New York. If he can take them down and effectively eliminate them from champs while putting LAG in a good position, if that will be the storyline to cap off all storylines of the season, especially after Crim had those words right earlier on saying no one wants to pick him up, no one wants him, all this type of stuff. So that's a grudge match for the ages. That's coming up in the first week of qualifiers that you can't really beat, to be honest. But very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit on the like button, tell us YouTube gods, this is a good video, and as you should see it as well, and I've grown the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.